I still remember the way the rain tapped against the tall windows of Grandma Alina's old Victorian house that afternoon. It sounded like gentle fingers trying to warn me. I sat in the worn leather armchair she used to love, the one with the faded floral cushion, clutching a cup of lukewarm tea. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. My name is Sophia, and for as long as I can remember, Grandma Alina was my entire world. When I was 8 years old, my parents were taken from me in a car accident on a slick highway. From that day forward, Grandma stepped in without hesitation. She became my mother, my father, my best friend, and my safe place. She taught me how to bake her famous cinnamon rolls, how to tend her rose garden, and most importantly, how to love fiercely even when life tries to break you. Uncle Richard, my father's older brother, was never around much during those years. He lived 2 hours away with his wife, Aunt Lydia, and their 2 children, Marcus and Brooke. They visited on holidays, but it always felt forced. Grandma would light up when I entered the room, but her smile would tighten when Richard walked in. I noticed it even as a child, though I never understood why. Over the years, I became her caregiver. When she turned 78 and her health began to fade, I moved back into the big house without a second thought. I quit my marketing job in the city, put my own dreams on hold, and devoted 3 full years to her. I cooked her meals, helped her bathe on the bad days, read her favorite books aloud, and held her hand through countless hospital visits. The nurses used to tell me I was the most devoted granddaughter they'd ever seen. Those words meant everything to me. Richard would call once every few months. "How, Mom doing?" he'd ask, but he rarely drove over. When he did visit, it was always about money, subtle hints about the estate and what Mom's planning. I ignored it. I told myself family was family. Until the day Grandma passed. It was a quiet Tuesday morning. She slipped away in her sleep while I was making her favorite oatmeal. I held her hand until it grew cold, whispering goodbye through tears that wouldn't stop. The pain was so deep it felt like someone had hollowed out my chest. The funeral was beautiful but heartbreaking. Richard stood at the front like he was the grieving son, shaking hands and accepting condolences while I stood in the back, trying not to fall apart. He didn't even look at me. A week later, the lawyer's office called. It was time for the will reading. I dressed carefully that day, in the soft blue sweater Grandma had knitted for me 2 Christmases ago. I wanted to feel close to her. As I drove to the lawyer's office downtown, my heart felt heavy but hopeful. I wasn't expecting money. I just wanted one last connection to the woman who raised me. When I walked into the conference room, the air felt thick. Richard and his family were already seated. Marcus and Brooke scrolled on their phones while Aunt Lydia filed her nails. Richard barely glanced up. Mr. Harlan, Grandma's longtime lawyer, sat at the head of the long oak table with a thick folder in front of him. He gave me a kind, almost sad smile. "Shall we begin?" he asked gently. I took my seat at the far end, folding my hands in my lap. That's when Richard finally looked at me, really looked, and smirked. "What is she even doing here?" he said loudly, as if I couldn't hear. "This is a family matter." The words hit like a slap. I stared at him, stunned. Mr. Harlan cleared his throat. "Sophia is family, Richard. Alina insisted she be present." Richard leaned back in his chair and laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "Family, please, she's a stranger with our last name. Took advantage of Mom when she was weak. Lived in her house, ate her food. Now she thinks she's getting a piece of the pie." He turned to me with pure contempt. "You're not blood, Sophia, not really. You're just convenient." My heart shattered right there in that room. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Aunt Lydia whispered something to Brooke, and they both giggled softly. I wanted to run, but something in Mr. Harlan's calm expression kept me glued to my chair. He opened the folder slowly. "Before we proceed with the reading," he said, his voice steady and serious, "I think it's important that everyone hears what Alina wanted to say in her own words." He pressed play on a small recorder. And that's when everything changed. Grandma's frail but determined voice filled the room. "If you're listening to this, I've gone home. Sophia, my darling girl, you were never a stranger. You were my greatest blessing." Richard's face twisted in shock as Grandma's voice continued. I sat frozen, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. She spoke for nearly 15 minutes on that recording. She talked about how I had sacrificed my youth to care for her, how I had given up promotions, relationships, and opportunities just to make her last years peaceful. She spoke about the nights I stayed up when she was scared, the way I sang to her when the pain was too much, and how my love felt pure in a way her own son never had. Then her tone changed. Richard, my son, I loved you, but love without respect becomes pain. For years, you have taken from me. You forged my signature on documents. You drained accounts I trusted you to manage. You told me lies about investments while you bought luxury cars and vacations. You neglected me when I needed you most. And worst of all, you taught your children to look down on the one person who actually cared. Richard shot up from his chair. This is ridiculous. She was old and confused. Mr. Harlan paused the recording. Please sit down, Richard. There is more. Grandma continued. To my son Richard, I leave the sum of $1. This is not out of hate, but out of justice. The rest of my estate, the house, the investments, the savings I protected goes to my granddaughter Sophia. She is my true heir in every way that matters. The silence in the room was deafening. I couldn't breathe. The house, the savings, everything. Richard exploded. This is fraud. She manipulated Mom. I'll contest this will. I'll drag you through court for years, Sophia. You'll get nothing. His words cut deep. Even in that moment of supposed victory, the betrayal burned. This was the man who should have been my uncle, my family. Instead, he looked at me with pure hatred. The following weeks were hell. Richard made good on his threat. He filed to contest the will immediately. He spread rumors in the family that I had isolated Grandma, turned her against him, even accused me of elder abuse. Some distant relatives believed him. Phone calls stopped. Invitations vanished. I felt completely alone. Nights were the worst. I would walk through Grandma's house, now legally mine, but still filled with her scent, and cry until I had nothing left. I questioned everything. Had I really stolen someone's inheritance? Was I the villain in this story? One particularly dark evening, I sat on the porch where Grandma and I used to watch fireflies. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Brooke, my cousin. You're pathetic, stealing from your own family. Karma will get you. I broke down completely. The pain of being called a stranger by blood relatives cut deeper than any financial loss ever could. But slowly, something inside me began to shift. I remembered Grandma's words on that recording, her pride in me, her love, and I realized I had spent years shrinking myself to keep peace with people who never valued me. Richard's betrayal wasn't new, it was just finally exposed. I hired my own lawyer. I gathered every receipt, every medical record, every message where Richard had asked for money. I stopped apologizing for existing. The discovery process began, and that's when the real truth started coming out. Mr. Harlan presented bank records showing Richard had siphoned nearly $180,000 from Grandma's accounts over 8 years. There were emails where he mocked her declining health. Witnesses, neighbors, and nurses came forward to testify how often I was there and how rarely he visited. Every piece of evidence chipped away at his lies. Yet the emotional toll was crushing. Some nights I wanted to give it all up just to make the fighting stop. But then I would remember sitting at Grandma's bedside, her whispering, "You are enough, Sophia. You've always been enough." That memory became my strength. 6 months after that painful will reading, we stood in court for the final hearing. Richard looked smaller somehow. His expensive watch was gone. The confident smirk had been replaced by desperation. He took the stand and tried one last time to paint me as a greedy opportunist. But when my lawyer played Grandma's recording again, this time in front of the judge, the entire courtroom fell silent. Her voice, full of love and disappointment, echoed through the room. The judge ruled in my favor completely. Not only did Richard's contest fail, but the court ordered him to repay the $180,000 he had taken, plus legal fees. His reputation in our small community was destroyed. Old friends distanced themselves. Even Aunt Lydia filed for separation shortly after. I didn't feel triumphant in a cruel way. I felt justice. A few weeks later, Richard showed up at the house that was now truly mine. He stood on the porch looking broken. I was wrong, he muttered. Mom was right about me. I looked at the man who had called me a stranger. For a moment, I saw the little girl who once wished for a big, loving family. Then I saw the truth. I forgive you, Richard, I said quietly. Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry your bitterness. Grandma taught me better than that. Left with tears in his eyes, I never saw him again. In the year that followed, I made changes that would have made Grandma proud. I kept the house but turned part of it into a small community center for young women who had lost parents, a place where they could learn life skills, feel safe, and know they weren't alone. I started a scholarship in Grandma's name for caregivers who put their lives on hold for family. I found peace. Looking back now, I realized the greatest revenge wasn't taking the inheritance or watching Richard lose. The greatest revenge was becoming the woman Grandma always believed I could be: kind, strong, and unapologetic about my worth. To anyone listening who has been called a stranger in their own family, your value was never decided by their cruelty. Sometimes the people who should love us the most hurt us the deepest. But that pain can become your turning point. You are not a stranger. You are enough. You always were. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If you've experienced betrayal by family, drop a comment below. You are not alone. Until next time, protect your peace. It's the most valuable thing you'll ever own.